Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the Roadmaster Smart Diode for incandescent light bulbs on a 2022 Ford F-150. There's going to be 5 main components required when flat towing a vehicle, and the first is going to be the base plate, and that's going to be the structural support that's on the frame of the vehicle, and that's going to allow you to hook up your tow bar, and that's going to be the connecting point between the hitch on the RV and the base plate. That way you can safely tow it down the road. And just like a trailer, you're also going to have safety cables, and that way in case of a disconnect, they're going to keep everything nice and attached, and that's going to attach to the hitch as well as the base plate. Now also, diode wiring is going to be important. It's going to transmit the light signals from the RV to the taillights on the towed vehicle. We also have a braking system, and today we have the Air Force One because we have air brakes on our coach, so that's what this cable is for. But with every braking system, there's going to be a breakaway cable, and that way, in case of a catastrophic disconnect, it's going to pull this cable, bringing the vehicle to a stop. That way it's not rolling down the highway. Adding diodes to a flat-towed vehicle is definitely the new wave of technology that's been around for a little bit, but long gone are the days of having magnetic lights sticking to the back of vehicles, especially because, well, like an F-150 today, it's aluminum, so those magnets aren't really going to stick to that, and a lot of your braking systems will need to actually tie into diode wiring. So if you get a stay-and-play duo, you're going to have to get it. That way you can tap into those. And the way that it works essentially is just a cable that goes from the umbilical on your RV, and it's going to take those light signals as you hit the brakes, running lights, and turn signals, and transmit those to the taillights on your towed vehicle. And it's pretty easy. You're just routing a cable from the front on your 6-pole to the back into the taillights, and that's where you're going to splice into that factory wiring, which seems scary, but really it's not too bad. The diode is essentially just a one-way check valve to make sure that electricity doesn't backfeed, and these are super reliable. Once they're in place, it doesn't cause any issues when normally driving your truck down the road, and when you're ready to flat tow, you just simply plug in that umbilical and you're ready to rock. Now when it comes to getting your vehicle flat tow set up, there's going to be some installation that's going to be required, and if it's something that's maybe beyond your scope after watching our installation videos, maybe you don't have the space to do it or the tools to do it or even the want to do it, you can use our dealer network here at eTrailer, and that way you can find someone close to home that can do the installation for you. But for those of you that are DIYers and maybe a little bit handy and want to do this yourself, follow along and I'll walk you through how to get yours installed. Now to get our diode wiring installed, it's really not too hard to do. It's essentially just taking our 4-pole wiring here that we have, running it back to the taillights, tying into those with our diodes. But there's a few things that you need to consider when getting this installed. Which braking system are you using can determine your path of getting this ran back. So if you're using a stay-and-play duo, I believe the Invisibrake as well will tie into your diode wiring. So I highly recommend pulling up a loop into the engine bay. That way when you're installing, you're not having to do that underneath the vehicle or in a tight spot. So if you do have that stay-and-play duo, take your wire. I just kind of used my safety chain loop here to tape this up. And you can determine exactly where you want your plug. On the front of the F-150, there's not a whole lot of great spots, but something that we've done is this plastic panel. You can just simply pop that out and drill a hole for your diode wiring to go. So that's going to be my end goal. Now something else that I'll point out is if you're planning on doing a charge line, you're also going to want to get that in place here before getting your 6-pole on, because you'll tie that into it as well, and that's going to just run up to the battery. It's a good addition to any flat tow because it'll trickle charge your battery as you're going down the road, which is really nice, especially if your vehicle stays on during the flat tow, or at least in accessory mode. It'll drain the battery, and a charge line can omit that problem for you. So starting off, again, I just taped this up, I popped our panel out, and trying to get a safe path back, you want to make sure that you're not going to be on any suspension, anything hot or pinch points. So I went kind of by our charge piping, by our intercooler, and just kind of looped it up. From here, if you want to take off this underbody panel, it might make it a little bit easier. And I just made my way to the frame rail here. And at this point, I did split off. So you need to make sure that the white wire is grounded. So it's twofold here. We're going to be grounding our wire, but also we're going to give ourselves some extra wire by peeling back the white. So peel it back to where you want to ground. I looked for a factory ground under here. Nothing was super easy to get to. So what I ended up doing is just taking that white wire, putting our ring terminal and self-tapping it into the frame to become our vehicle ground. And all that excess white wire we're going to use downstream to connect between our running lights. So at this point, I did try to split off to make sure we had enough length to get to each of the taillights. So our green is going to be our right turn signal. We'll follow that first. So we split this off, and the holes in the frame I used to zip tie up as we go. Went over this cross member here, and obviously you have an exhaust here. So again, just making sure that you stay away from that. And made my way back, just again, following along the frame, and I actually used the corrugation in the bed to channel that through to keep it nice and taut, and then made my way back to our taillight pocket. Now this extra white wire is the excess that I cut off, and this just runs across. That way we can tie in from left and right running light signals, and that's a quick, easy way to do that without having to buy extra wire. So same thing, our yellow and brown is going to be our left turn signal and our running light wire. This I tracked over this way, kind of following the same path using that bed corrugation. You can see I just kind of tucked it in. There's a gap there, and that seems to work pretty well. And then I just made my way back up to where I split off those wires. So just kind of go along. And if you have factory wire loom that you can zip tie up to, you can see here, that's a really great option. Generally, they're in locations that are going to be safe from any damage. So then this just goes back to where I split it off. So at this point, I'm going to go back and get our taillights taken out, and we can start getting our diodes in place. Now we need to remove our taillights so we can get to that factory wiring to splice in and get our diodes in place. And to get the taillights removed, super easy. It's just two 8mm screws. So we'll go ahead and get those taken out. And then there are going to be some alignment tabs on here, so what I recommend doing is just kind of wiggle this back and forth. The alignment tab up in this corner, it goes in at an angle like this. You can see that there. So if you need to, you can use a plastic trim tool to kind of pry on here to get it to pop out. Sometimes spraying a little bit of soapy water in here will help loosen up if you have any dirt or debris. Now, to make this a little bit easier, we can separate our tail lights, and it's just going to be two clips here. And I've already gone ahead and tested these to make it easy on you. So normally at this point you'd have someone hop in the vehicle, run through the lights and make sure that you have the proper wires, but I've gone ahead and done that. So we'll set this aside. And the taillights on this truck, the top and bottom lights run essentially the same lights as far as your brakes, turn signals, and all that. So this just splits off. So what I did is I went to this section here and determined our running light signal as well as our stop and turn. So running light signal on this on the passenger side is going to be the white with the orange. And then you actually can pick from two different wires, but I went ahead and did the green with the orange stripe, so I just went ahead and cut that. So I'll grab my wire strippers and then we can continue on with getting those installed. Now, when it comes to the wires, the smart diodes are a little bit different in the fact that you aren't having to tap into the vehicle's running light signal. It's actually going to come from the 4-pole wiring that we ran back. So the wires that we're going to be using for the stop and turn on our truck are going to be a green with an orange stripe on our passenger side. And we'll get the driver's side a little bit later, but let's go ahead, we'll make these connections. So those wires that we ran back, I'm just gonna push those through the taillight pocket. If you need to, you can run a pull wire to kind of get these all routed up. So make sure you have that jumper white wire from the excess that we had, and then also your green wire we'll be pulling up. So with our wires routed up, I'm just gonna go ahead and peel back a little bit with our wire strippers. I'd say 1/4 of an inch is generally about right. And we're also going to be doing that to the wire, the green with the orange. Now these are pretty thin wires here, and if you need to pull back some of this insulation a little bit more to gain access to them, go ahead and do that. But I'm going to strip this back a little bit more than our other wires, and that way I can kind of bend this wire over to give it a little bit more bite when we put them in the spade connectors. But go ahead and strip both of these back. Your diodes are going to be labeled as to which each of your spade connectors that they're going to. So take off the two from car brake in, car brake out, and that's going to be our factory wire here. The out is going to be towards the plugs, so just we'll get that all plugged in here. But to get the spade connectors, again, I'm just bending this down to give it a little bit more to bite down onto. And anytime you make a connection with crimpers, whether it be a butt connector or a spade connector like we have, I always recommend just giving it a quick tug at the end just to make sure that it's on there. That way you don't have to go back and chase any wires to find a loose contact. So we got that one in place. We'll get this one here. And we can pull the other spade connectors off of our diode, and then we can make our first connection here. So again, go to the plug side, car brake out, and then car brake in here. With these wires up, obviously I have quite a bit of excess, so I'm going to trim this back a little bit. And don't go too short, because a lot of times when you go to put the taillight back in, you want to have a little bit of mobility to be able to have space to where the diode can kind of tuck by. It's not particularly large, but it can get a little bit tricky sometimes getting the taillight back in if you don't have any slack to move it. So we'll get this on our green wire. And this is going to go to our RV brake. And that's going to be our turn signals and braking. And then our white wire. This white wire is our jumper for the running lights. And on our passenger side, this is just going to be normal here. But as we get to the driver's side, we are going to be doing something slightly different on this end just to make sure that it's connecting that jumper to where it needs to be. So we'll get this popped in place here. And that just leaves our ground. And included in the kit is going to be this little package. Grab that little white wire and also the ring terminal and a self-tapping screw. We'll just strip back both ends of our ground wire. We'll put a spade on one side. And that'll connect to the ground. And then on the other side, we're going to put that ring terminal. And then we're going to need to self-tap this in on solid metal that's going to be part of the chassis. So really just a spot that's not going to go into the inside of our bed, but this whole portion here, I can see the other side. I know that there's nothing back there, so we'll go ahead and get this mounted up. If you want to, you can do a small little pilot hole just to kind of make it easier for the self-tapping screw, or you can just simply use an impact with that driver bit. So I'll get this mounted up. And with this, you don't need to get too crazy. In fact, just enough to where that ring terminal is not going to move. It's nice and snug. If you go any more than that, you can actually strip out those threads you just made and make it to where it's not a very good ground. So at this point, what I like to do, just to kind of protect all of our wires to make sure that there's no strain on them or that they pull out, is I'm going to grab some, you can use zip ties and zip tie this up, but also some electrical tape just to wrap this all together, keep it nice and tidy. And again, that's just going to help prevent water from getting in these connections, but also just kind of act as a nice little wire strain here just to prevent any damage. So now that we have all of our connections made, I'm just going to tape these up again, make it nice and structurally sound, and then we're going to head up to the front of the vehicle to attach it to our 6-pole. So if you have any wires underneath that you need to zip tie up, now's a great time to do that. On our driver's side, it's going to be very similar. The wires do change colors, so the one that we'll be splicing into is going to be gray with an orange stripe. So go ahead, you can cut that and put your spade terminals on there. This will again go to the car brake out, car brake in on the other side. And I've pulled up the 3 wires here. So we have that jumper wire, our brown and yellow, which we ran on this side. And what we're going to do is we're going to connect the brown and white jumper to one wire. That way we can still get our spade terminal attached, but it's also going to send that signal to the other side. So I'll just cut this, and I'm going to hold on to this extra white wire here. We'll strip back both of them. And when combining 2 wires, in this fashion, what I'd try to do is strip back a little extra here, and that way you can kind of twist them together to get a nice connection. And included is going to be this yellow butt connector, so we'll get this twisted together. We'll crimp down this side. And then with just a small length of white wire here, we'll connect that as well as a spade terminal on the other side. And also, this is a larger gauge butt connector than just a normal 1 wire, so this is definitely a good time. Strip it back a little bit, double it over, and that's just going to fill that gap a little bit better, giving you a much better connection. And with that connection made, we can plug this in to our diode. So this is going to be our RV tail. And then our yellow wire, we're just going to put that spade connector on and get that to our RV brake. And then we just have that ground wire that we're going to attach the same on the other side. Now, to get your 6-pole all installed, it's super easy, but really determining in that spot where you want it. Again, I'm going to be using this panel. I'm going to cut out a hole, and it's going to be deep enough in this portion to be able to get those wires ran. So eventually I'll get this permanently mounted by just using self-tappers once all the electrical connections are made. But for this instance, I'm still going to show you how to hook it up. And again, I mentioned that charge line. So if you have that, go ahead, make sure you have that wire. You don't necessarily, well, you don't want it attached to the battery at this point, but just take that wire and prep this the same as these by just taking off, again, that 1/4 inch. And you can spread these out, strip them back. And you're going to want a small Phillips head screwdriver. And each of these have a little screw that just tightens down onto the wire. So I'm going to back some of these out. And you'll see that there's molded letters here, and that's going to tell us exactly where we need to put our wires. So I'm going to go ahead and get mine hooked up, and then I'll show you exactly where they go. So the layout, pretty simple. At our 12 o'clock position, you're going to find that it's molded TM, that's tail marker. So that's going to be our brown for the running light. We'll have GD, which is ground. That's going to be our white wire. LT is going to be our left turn, so that's going to be yellow. RT is right turn, so that's green. And then that center taller post is going to be for your 12-volt charge line. Now there's another one here that's marked S. We generally don't use that. You can do some supplemental stuff with that if you need that connection made. But for our instance today, we're not going to be using that. So at this point, what we're going to want to do is test to make sure that it's working. And we're going to be using a test box to simulate hooking up to an RV. But if you have your RV handy, grab your umbilical, and we're going to make that connection and run through the light signals to make sure that they're transmitting to the taillights on our truck. So with our test box, I'll run through the light signals. First, we're going to do our running lights. Next, we'll do our right turn signal. Then we'll do our left turn signal. And then finally our brakes. So now that we got it all working properly and we've tested it, I'm going to go ahead and take this back off because we're going to get it permanently installed as I mentioned previous. We're also going to get the rest of our flat toe components set up. But we'll come back a little bit later and I'll have this all mounted up and show you how it looks. And that's pretty much going to do it for the installation of your diodes. And that was a look at installation of the Roadmaster Smart Diodes for incandescent bulbs on a 2022 Ford F-150.